My parents gave everything to my sister, but karma had other plans. My name is Ananya Sharma, and for as long as I can remember I have been invisible. Not in the way that ghosts are invisible, or in the way that shadows disappear when the sun goes down. I was invisible in the way that background furniture is invisible. You know it's there, but you never really look at it. You never think about its feelings. You never wonder if it dreams of being something more. You never ask if it has a heart that beats, a soul that aches, or a mind that yearns for recognition. I was the older daughter, the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who never caused any trouble. My sister Priya was the sun. I was just the cold, distant shadow that followed her everywhere, clinging to her edges, barely visible in her brilliant glow. And my parents, they were the devoted worshippers who revolved around her glorious orbit, their lives organized around her whims, their happiness dependent on her smiles. The story of our family is not a complicated one. It is as old as time itself, a golden child and a forgotten one, a favorite and a spare, the one who could do no wrong and the one who could do nothing right, the one who was celebrated and the one who was merely tolerated. I have spent years trying to understand why. Was it something I did? Was it something I failed to do? Was I simply born without the charm, the beauty, the magnetic pull that made Priya so irresistible to everyone around her? I have never found a satisfactory answer. Perhaps there is no answer. Perhaps some families are simply built this way, on a foundation of unequal love, and no amount of analysis can change the fundamental structure. All I know is that from the moment Priya was born, I ceased to exist in any meaningful way. I became a footnote in her story, a minor character in a drama where she was the undisputed star. Priya was born 3 years after me. I was 3 years old when she arrived, just old enough to remember the before times, just young enough to be completely unprepared for the aftershocks of her arrival. I have vague memories of my mother holding me, singing to me, reading me bedtime stories. These memories are fuzzy like photographs left out in the rain, the edges blurring, the colors fading. But they are there. I know I was loved once, before Priya. The moment Priya came into the world, everything changed. My mother's attention shifted like a compass needle finding north. My father, who had always been a quiet, distant presence, suddenly became animated, doting, almost giddy with joy. Relatives who had never visited before flocked to our house to see the new baby. Gifts piled up in the nursery. The house was filled with laughter and celebration. And I was forgotten. I remember standing at the door of the nursery, watching my mother cradle Priya in her arms. She was singing a lullaby, the same lullaby she used to sing to me. But her voice was softer now, more tender. Her eyes were filled with a love I had never seen before. I felt a strange ache in my chest, a feeling I couldn't name at the time. It was only years later that I understood what it was. It was the first stirrings of grief, the grief of losing something you never knew you had. The grief of realizing that love is not infinite, that it can be redirected, that it can be taken away. "Come here, Beta," my mother said, noticing me at the door. "Come meet your little sister." I walked over slowly, my small feet shuffling on the carpet. I looked down at the tiny bundle in my mother's arms. Priya was beautiful even then. She had perfect little features, a head full of dark hair, and eyes that seemed to look right through you. She was so small, so fragile. I reached out a tentative finger to touch her cheek, and she wrapped her tiny hand around it. For a moment I felt a connection, a bond. But that bond was short-lived. As Priya grew, she became the center of our universe. Everything revolved around her. Her needs came first, her wants were prioritized, her feelings were the only ones that mattered. I learned this lesson early and often. My 10th birthday is the example I always give when people ask me to explain my childhood. It is the moment that crystallized everything for me, the moment I understood once and for all where I stood in my family. I had been planning my 10th birthday for months. I had seen the elaborate parties my friends had, with themed decorations, party favors, and massive cakes. I knew I wouldn't get anything like that, but I had hoped for something small, a few friends from school, a cake with my name on it, a moment where I was the center of attention just for an hour or two. My mother had agreed. She had promised me a small party. I had spent weeks choosing my outfit, a pretty yellow dress I had saved my pocket money for. I had practiced my smile in the mirror, imagining what it would feel like to be celebrated. I had made a list of friends to invite, carefully chosen to include only the ones who might actually come. The night before my birthday, I could barely sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting down the hours until morning. I imagined my mother bringing me breakfast in bed, a tradition she had started when I was younger but had abandoned in recent years. I imagined my father giving me a hug and wishing me a happy birthday. I imagined my friends arriving, laughing, singing, making me feel special. I was so naive. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up to the sound of my mother's voice, but it wasn't calling my name. She was in Priya's room. Priya had woken up with a fever, nothing serious, just a common cold, but to my mother it was a national emergency. I got out of bed and walked to Priya's door. My mother was sitting on the edge of the bed, pressing a cool cloth to Priya's forehead. Priya was whimpering dramatically, making sure everyone knew how miserable she was. "She's so sick, poor thing," my mother said, not looking up. "We need to take care of her." "Ma," I said quietly, "it's my birthday today." My mother glanced at me distracted. "I know, Beta, but your sister is unwell. We can't have a party today. We'll do it another time." "When?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We'll figure it out later. Go get dressed, we need to go to the pharmacy." Another time never came. My 10th birthday passed without a single candle, without a single song, without a single moment of recognition. I sat in my room that evening, still wearing my yellow dress, waiting for someone to remember. No one did. I heard my mother cooing over Priya in the next room, and I learned my first hard lesson about love. Some people get all of it, some people get none. And sometimes the people who get none are the ones who need it most. This pattern continued for years, a relentless rhythm of neglect that wore me down like water wearing away stone. Priya got the new clothes, I got her hand-me-downs. Priya got the private tutors, I was told to study on my own. Priya got a car on her 16th birthday, I got a bus pass and a reminder that I should be grateful I was getting an education at all. My parents weren't poor, they were reasonably well off with comfortable middle-class incomes and no major debts, but their resources, both emotional and financial, flowed in only one direction. It wasn't that they didn't have enough to give, it was that they chose not to give to me. I remember watching Priya unwrap her gifts on her birthdays, piles of presents carefully wrapped, each one more expensive than the last. A new phone, designer clothes, a laptop, jewelry, tickets to concerts. I would sit in the corner, smiling politely, pretending to be happy for her, but inside I was hollow. I was a ghost at my own family's celebration. And it wasn't just the material things. It was the small, everyday cruelties that cut the deepest. The way my mother would praise Priya's mediocre achievements while ignoring my real accomplishments. The way my father would nod approvingly at Priya's plans while dismissing my dreams with a wave of his hand. The way relatives would coo over Priya's beauty and charm while barely acknowledging my existence. "Priya is so talented," my mother would say, beaming. "She got an A in art class." I had gotten straight A's in every subject, but my mother never mentioned it. She never asked about my grades, my projects, or my goals. She didn't care. I was the one who didn't need attention. I was the one who was fine on my own. And so I learned to be fine. I learned to hide my pain behind a mask of cheerful competence. I learned to smile when I wanted to cry. I learned to say I'm okay when I was falling apart. I became an expert at making myself small and invisible, a master of emotional survival. Part 2: The Years of Struggle. The scholarship was my ticket out. It was a lifeline, thrown to me by a universe that had otherwise been indifferent to my existence. I had worked for it, of course. I had worked harder than anyone I knew. I had spent countless nights hunched over my textbooks, my eyes burning, my back aching, my mind exhausted. I had given up sleep, socializing, and any semblance of a normal teenage life. I had done it all in the desperate hope that someone, anyone, would notice. No one noticed, but the scholarship committee did. They saw my grades, my test scores, my essays. They saw something in me that my parents had never seen. They saw potential. They saw worth. They saw a young woman who deserved a chance. When I got the letter, I was alone in my room. I opened it with trembling hands, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The words blurred before my eyes. I had to read them 3 times before I believed them. I had gotten the scholarship, a full ride, tuition, books, living expenses, everything covered. I wanted to scream with joy. I wanted to run to my parents and tell them the news. I wanted them to hug me, to congratulate me, to finally be proud of me. But I knew better. I knew they wouldn't care. So I sat on my bed, clutching the letter to my chest, and I cried. I cried for all the years of neglect. I cried for the little girl who had never been celebrated. And I cried for the young woman who was finally going to get a chance to escape. I didn't tell my parents immediately. I waited until dinner, the one time we all sat together as a family. I waited until my mother was distracted, my father was reading the newspaper, and Priya was scrolling through her phone. I cleared my throat and said the words. Ma Baba, I got a scholarship, a full scholarship to university. My mother looked up mildly interested. Oh, that's nice, Beta. My father grunted. Which university? I told them it was a good university, a respected one. My mother nodded absently and returned to her meal. My father went back to his newspaper. Priya didn't even look up from her phone. That's wonderful, Ananya, my mother said, but her voice was flat, uninterested. You'll have to work hard, of course. We can't afford to help you with anything. I had expected this. I had prepared for this. I knew they wouldn't offer to pay for my expenses even though they had the money. I knew they wouldn't help me move into my dormitory or buy me supplies. I knew they wouldn't visit me or call me or send me care packages. I was on my own. I had always been on my own. But the silence was deafening. The indifference was crushing. I had achieved something amazing, something that should have made them proud, and they had dismissed it like it was nothing. I left for university the following fall. I packed my bags myself, took the bus to campus, and moved into my dormitory alone. I watched other students arrive with their families, their parents helping them unpack, their mothers crying, their fathers hugging them goodbye. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, the same ache I had felt on my 10th birthday, the ache of being forgotten. But I didn't let it break me. I had a plan. I would study hard, get good grades, and build a life for myself. I would become successful, independent, and self-sufficient. I would prove that I didn't need anyone. I would prove that I was enough. And I did. I threw myself into my studies with a ferocity that surprised even me. I took extra classes, joined study groups, and stayed up late into the night, determined to be the best. I also worked 2 jobs, waiting tables and tutoring to support myself. I didn't ask my parents for a single rupee. I knew it would be refused anyway. My parents, meanwhile, were busy funding Priya's dreams. Priya had decided she wanted to study abroad. She had chosen an expensive private university in a foreign country, and my parents had agreed to pay for everything. They sold their second car. They took out a loan against their home. They drained their savings accounts. They did it all without hesitation, without question, without a single thought about their own financial security. We want the best for Priya, my mother told me on the phone. She has such a bright future. She deserves this opportunity. I didn't argue. I didn't point out that I had never been given such opportunities. I didn't remind them that I had paid for my own education, that I had never asked them for a single rupee. I just said, I'm happy for her, Ma. I hope she enjoys it. It was a lie. I wasn't happy for her. I was angry. I was bitter. I was consumed by a resentment that festered like an open wound. But I had learned long ago not to express my feelings, so I swallowed them, locked them away, and focused on my own life. The years passed. I graduated with honors, the top of my class. I got a job at a prestigious firm, a position that most graduates could only dream of. I worked my way up from an entry-level position to a senior manager in record time. I was making good money, living comfortably, and building a reputation as a hard-working, reliable professional. Priya, meanwhile, was floundering. She had changed majors 3 times, dropping out of 2 programs, and eventually returning home with a half-finished degree and a sense of entitlement that had only grown stronger. The year abroad, which was supposed to be the beginning of her brilliant career, had been a disaster. She had spent most of her time partying, traveling, and running up credit card bills. She had barely passed her classes, and her professors had given her mediocre recommendations. It wasn't my fault, she whined to my parents. The professors were terrible. The university didn't support me. I just need time to figure out what I really want to do. My parents, of course, nodded sympathetically. They gave her a room in their house, paid off her credit card debts, and continued to treat her like the golden child she had always been. They made excuses for her failures, dismissed her shortcomings, and continued to pour their resources into her bottomless pit of need. I watched from a distance, a strange mix of anger and pity churning in my chest. I was angry that my parents had sacrificed everything for a daughter who had never earned their loyalty, but I also pitied them. They were trapped in a cycle of love and denial, unable to see the truth that was blindingly obvious to everyone else. Their golden child was nothing but a beautiful mirage, a fantasy they had constructed and refused to abandon. Part 3, the meeting that changed everything. It was during this time that I met Arjun. I was at a work conference, tired and stressed, trying to network with people I didn't care about. He was standing by the coffee station, looking just as out of place as I felt. He had kind eyes and a warm smile, and when he offered me a cup of coffee, I felt something shift inside me, a crack in the wall I had built around my heart. "I'm Arjun," he said, extending his hand. "I'm an architect. I'm here because my boss made me come. I'd rather be anywhere else." I laughed, the first genuine laugh I had let out in months. "I'm Ananya, I'm in finance, and I agree completely." We talked for hours that night, long after the conference had ended. We talked about our jobs, our dreams, our frustrations. We talked about our families, our childhoods, our scars. I told him about Priya, about my parents, about the years of neglect. He told me about his own struggles, his own family drama, his own journey to healing. By the end of the night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt hope. I felt connection. I felt the possibility of love. We started dating soon after. It was slow and careful, both of us wary of getting hurt. But as the weeks turned into months, we grew closer. Arjun was patient, kind, and understanding. He never pressured me or pushed me. He just listened. And that was what I needed most. Someone to listen. Someone to see me, really see me for who I truly was. "I love you, Ananya," he told me one evening, his eyes soft and sincere. "I love you for who you are, not for what you can do for me, not for your job or your salary or your family, just you." I cried. I hadn't cried in years, but I cried that night. I cried for all the years of invisibility, all the years of neglect, all the years of feeling like I didn't matter. And I cried because finally, someone had seen me. Someone had chosen me. Someone had made me feel like I was enough. We decided to get married. It was a simple decision, natural and inevitable. We loved each other and we wanted to build a life together. I was terrified of telling my parents. I knew they wouldn't care, but I had to try. For my own sake, I had to give them one more chance. "Ma Baba, I'm getting married," I announced one evening at dinner. It was the same family dinner, the same scene, the same indifference. My mother looked up from her plate, mildly annoyed at the interruption. "Oh, to whom?" she asked, as if the question was of no consequence. "His name is Arjun. He's an architect. He's a good man. He treats me well." My father grunted. "Is he wealthy? Does he come from a good family?" "He comes from a middle-class family. They're good people. They're not wealthy, but they're comfortable." My mother sighed, exchanging a look with my father. "Well, I suppose if that's what you want, but you know we can't afford a big wedding. You'll have to manage with whatever you have." I had expected this. I had prepared for this, but it still hurt. It hurt to hear them dismiss my happiness, my love, my future. They hadn't asked if I was happy. They hadn't asked about the man I was marrying. They had simply dismissed me the way they always had. Priya, however, was delighted. "Oh, Ananya, how exciting. You'll make such a beautiful bride. I'll be your maid of honor, of course. I'll help you plan everything." She said this with such genuine enthusiasm that I almost believed she cared. But I knew better. Priya loved weddings. She loved being the center of attention. And being my maid of honor would give her plenty of opportunities to shine, to charm, to steal the spotlight. The wedding was small and modest. Arjun and I paid for everything ourselves. My parents contributed a token amount, just enough to cover the venue. They didn't offer to help with anything else. They didn't offer to host a reception or buy my dress or arrange the catering. They just showed up on the day, looking perfunctory and slightly bored. Priya, predictably, showed up in a designer dress that cost more than my entire bridal trousseau. She flitted around, charming the guests, making sure everyone noticed how beautiful she was. She took over the planning at the last minute, changing the seating arrangement, adding decorations, and making herself the unofficial co-hostess. And I let her because that was my role. I was the supporting character in her life. I was the one who made sacrifices so she could shine. I had been doing it my whole life and I didn't know how to stop. But Arjun saw it. He saw everything. He saw Priya's dominance, my parents' indifference, and my quiet acceptance. He squeezed my hand during the reception and whispered in my ear, "Don't let her ruin your day, Ananya. This is about us. This is about our love. She doesn't matter." He was right, she didn't matter. But the weight of years of neglect was hard to shake. It clung to me like a second skin, a constant reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. After the wedding, we settled into our new life together. Arjun and I rented a small apartment. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We filled it with love, laughter, and dreams. We talked about the future, about children, about travel, about all the adventures we would have together. For the first time in my life I was happy, truly, deeply happy. I had a loving husband, a successful career, and a future full of promise. The past was behind me. I was ready to move forward. But the past has a way of catching up with you, and my past was about to come crashing down on me in ways I never anticipated. Part 4: The Crash. The crash came in the form of a phone call from my mother. It was late past midnight, and I was already in bed, Arjun asleep beside me. I answered groggily, my mind still foggy with sleep. Ananya, my mother's voice was thin, shaky, on the verge of tears. It's your father. He's had a stroke. He's in the hospital. We need you. I sat up, fully awake now, my heart pounding. What happened? Is he okay? What hospital? My mother gave me the details in a halting voice. My father had collapsed earlier that evening while Priya was out with her friends. My mother had found him on the floor, unresponsive. She had called an ambulance and he was now in the ICU. He's stable, she said, but he's not out of danger. The doctors are running tests. We need to pay for the treatment. We don't have the money. I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. I knew my parents had financial problems. I knew they had spent everything on Priya. But this was different. This was life or death. This was my father, the man who had ignored me for my entire life, but still my father. Which hospital? I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. She told me. I told her I would be there as soon as possible. I hung up, got dressed, and woke Arjun. Arjun, my father had a stroke. I need to go to the hospital. He was awake immediately, his concern evident in his eyes. I'll drive you. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. I don't know what I'm feeling. We drove to the hospital in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. When we arrived, my mother was sitting in the waiting room, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Priya was nowhere to be seen. Where's Priya? I asked. My mother looked down, ashamed. She's at home. She said she was too stressed to come. She needed to rest. I felt a surge of anger so powerful it made me dizzy. My father was in the ICU fighting for his life, and Priya was at home resting. She couldn't be bothered to visit her own father. She couldn't be bothered to support her mother. She was too busy taking care of herself. And yet my parents had given her everything, and she had given them nothing in return. The doctors say he's stable, my mother said, her voice trembling. But he needs more tests. The insurance won't cover everything. We don't have the money. We've spent everything on Priya. I bit my tongue. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say, I told you so. I warned you. You gave her everything and now you have nothing. But I didn't. I couldn't. My father was in the hospital and my mother was broken. They needed help, not recriminations. Don't worry, Ma, I said, putting my hand on her shoulder. We'll figure it out. I'll help. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. But we never gave you anything. We never helped you. How can you help us? Because you're my parents, I said simply. And whatever you did or didn't do, I still love you. Part 5: The Sacrifice. I spent the next few weeks managing the crisis. I paid for my father's medical bills, arranging for the best specialists and the best treatment. I negotiated with the hospital administration to reduce the charges. I found a way to stop the bank from taking my parents' apartment. I handled everything, from the logistics to the finances, while my mother sat by my father's bedside, holding his hand. The stress was overwhelming. I was working full-time, managing my own household and handling the medical crisis. But I didn't complain. I didn't ask for help. I did what needed to be done. Priya, meanwhile, continued her pattern of neglect. She visited the hospital occasionally, but she never stayed long. She always had an excuse, a meeting, a headache, a date. She offered no financial help, no emotional support, no practical assistance. She just floated through the crisis, untouched and unconcerned. My mother began to see the truth. It was a slow, painful realization, like watching a wound fester. She had spent her whole life protecting Priya, excusing Priya, prioritizing Priya. And now, when she needed Priya most, Priya had abandoned her. She never comes, my mother whispered to me one evening. We were sitting in the hospital cafeteria, sipping lukewarm coffee. She's always busy. She says she'll come, but she never does. I know, Mart, I said gently. I know. I gave her everything, my mother continued, her voice breaking. Everything, my savings, my energy, my love, and now she won't even visit her own father. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The truth was there, undeniable and painful. She's not coming back, is she? My mother asked, her eyes full of tears. I don't know, I admitted. But you can't wait for her, Ma. You have to take care of yourself, and you have to take care of Baba. My mother nodded slowly, the weight of the realization settling on her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she was seeing Priya clearly. She was seeing the selfishness, the entitlement, the complete lack of empathy. It was a harsh truth, but it was a necessary one. Part 6: The Confrontation. I waited until my father was stable before confronting Priya. I called her and asked her to meet me. We met at a cafe, the same cafe where Priya used to spend my parents' money on overpriced coffee and pastries. She arrived late, as usual, looking perfect and unconcerned. Ananya, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. This is a nice surprise. What did you want to talk about? I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Priya, I want to talk about Ma and Baba. She rolled her eyes. Oh, please, not again. You're always so dramatic, Ananya. I'm sure they're fine. They have you to take care of them. They don't need me. That's not true, I said, keeping my voice calm. They need both of us. Baba is in the hospital. Ma is exhausted. They need our help. And I'm helping, Priya said defensively. I visit when I can. I call when I can. I do what I can. Helping Priya.